Good morning, we're gonna start the meeting, the curriculum committee. It is December 7th at 8:04. We'll just go around and do introductions. I'm Erin Dove, chair of the curriculum committee and on the school board.
I'm Tani Schmidt, school board member and committee member.
Jennifer Boyer, assistant in curriculum.
Emily Melstrand, Director of Student Services.
I'm Heidi Spangola, Literacy Coordinator.
Carrie Hughes, Student Service Coordinator.
Dr. Jill Reese, Director of K Education.
Laura Jackson, assistant superintendent of teaching and learning.
Okay, and then we have a couple items on the agenda today. First is K-8 literacy resources. I think you're taking that, Laura?
Yep.
Okay.
So we wanted to kind of go over where we have been in our journey in literacy in K-8 and do a little short refresher on that. So our overall presentation is going to kind of provide that overview of where we started from 2014 on. We're going to talk briefly and review the implementation of the comprehensive literacy model, and then give an update on the current status of our literacy instructional resources, and then talk about what our next steps are. So just to review that, previously, benchmark literacy was adopted as the primary instructional resource for grades K through 6, beginning in the 2014 school year. Resources for benchmark literacy spanned all areas of literacy. So it included writing, it included word study, it included whole group lessons and small group lessons. The materials teachers were provided had teacher manuals and then posters designed to be references as the and guide the student thinking as they were working independently, and to reiterate the learning. Mentor texts were used for assessments, or for lessons, and to guide the ideas and comprehension strategies that would be focused on. And then assessment resources were provided. The teachers had done oral reading assessments utilizing the benchmark resources, and then again those small group and whole group text, including guided reading texts. That was for K-6. At the 7th and 8th grade level, the district utilized Engage New York, and so Engage New York literacy curriculum is accessible online. And for the most part, we utilize the online resources for our teachers, and then they would print materials for the students, the rubrics for students to reflect on, some of the guided thought activities, the guided comprehension activities that they did on the texts that they were reading. We did purchase individual copies of the texts that were linked to the Engage New York, such as A Long Journey to Water. And those texts were purchased for the students to use and the teachers to guide them through as they were working through the Engage New York. But for the most part, the teachers accessed the digital curriculum. And then we had put the course overviews in BYOC, so those were accessible to the public when we utilized the Build Your Own curriculum. So we, 2017-18, our elementary director of education at that time conducted a review. So we had been looking at our literacy data and where we had gotten to the 17-18 school year. And then our, at that time, the individual who was the director of elementary education conducted a review of literacy practices in the district. And we looked at what were those persistent gaps that we were seeing and why might we be seeing those. So from that review and the conversation that centered around that, we, going into the 18-19 school year, knew we wanted to identify a balanced literacy approach and use a balanced literacy approach. And we wanted to find a framework to help us implement that. So the balanced literacy approach says this is how you teach literacy. It's encompassing Reading and writing are reciprocal processes, so they flow together, and one helps build the other. So in 2018, that literacy research team did observations in other school districts that were utilizing different program or different frameworks for comprehensive literacy, different frameworks to implement a balanced literacy approach. Then in March 2019, we presented to the school board what the findings of the team were and what the decision was with regard to what framework were we utilizing going forward as we worked to shift our instructional practice in literacy. We had made the decision at that time to shift instructional practice before selecting new resources. So then during the 2019-20 school year, we began our 3-year implementation model. So in 2019, we made the decision of which framework to utilize, and that is the Partnership in Comprehensive Literacy. So that's the framework, it's not a curriculum. And then we laid out a 3-year plan for that, knowing that we were first really working on the instructional practices. So that implementation began in 2019. At the end of the 18-19 school year, all K-8 literacy teachers met at West Bend Mutual. West Bend Mutual gave us that a beautiful opportunity to have all the teachers in the same space, and wonderful technology to go through the training, the table space, and the environment where with all those people there, you could still have small group discussions, and they could work together without, and still be able to hear each other, right? So that was the launch for all K-8 literacy teachers into the comprehensive literacy plan and model. Then implementation began in that fall. So June, we did the initial training. They came back to school in August, having had access to literature that was grounding in the framework. Coming back to school in August, we began with the first instructional practice, and that being the small group instruction and structures that supported that small group instruction. And as we progressed through the year, we needed to address word study and that section of literacy first. And so the K-6 teachers looked at word study resources. Those were then adopted in 2020 during the spring semester of 2020 for implementation in fall of 2020. So word study was the first component of the literacy framework where we replaced the primary instructional resource. So at that point, benchmark literacy word study was no longer used, and we implemented the Fontes and Pinnell literacy. The Fontes and Pinnell word study. Any questions about that quick overview of those last few years?
I guess I just have a general question because of 2020.
Yes.
Do we anticipate, I mean, initially this was a 3-year implementation, do we anticipate that being longer?
Yes.
Okay.
And great point, because we started with our model classroom teachers in 2019, 2020, and they came and they spoke before you and talked about their process and what we had, the framework in the comprehensive literacy model framework. We train our model classroom teachers so that other teachers can come and observe them. They get feedback from their literacy specialist, and then it's rolled out to the entire grade level or the entire school then as well. Within each school, teachers can go and visit in the model classroom to see the practice in place. And then they can also go and see it in a classroom of the grade level they teach. So our first year of implementation, we did a kindergarten at one school, first grade at another, and second grade at a third. So all of our schools had one model classroom teacher. And again, you could, if you were third grade, but third grade wasn't in your building, you could go to the school where third grade model classroom teacher was, or you could watch and observe in the model classroom in your building. Then COVID hit, and we shut down, and then we weren't sending people out to other buildings last year at all. So you didn't have that opportunity to go see it necessarily in your grade level, but you could still see it in your building, cohorted and be masked, and they had to go in distance, but it was different because of the structure of the classrooms. So yes, our implementation slowed. So if you recall this past summer, in our curriculum committee, one of the things we talked about was what that slowdown, the impact on that. So each summer, we updated what we intended to accomplish. So that 3-year plan that was first shared in 2019 was revised in 2020, and we went over that with the board. And then again, this past summer, we went over it again. So that initial 3-year implementation certainly has slowed. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's okay. We have to,
Be responsive.
yeah, we have to be responsive to where our students are at, and I'd rather do it slow and right.
And we didn't grind it to a halt either.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm just going to do a little review of the partnership in comprehensive literacy, because that is the framework we selected to move forward. And again, it's not a curriculum, but one of the first communications we shared out detailed what the features of the comprehensive literacy model are. And again, that focuses on that professional growth, and it focuses on small group instruction and whole group instruction, and it focuses both on all aspects of literacy. So it includes the reading, the writing, the word study. And just to reiterate, comprehensive literacy is the framework we're implementing. Balanced literacy is this whole approach that, a big approach to instruction that talks about that breakdown of reading workshop, writing workshop, word work, we call it word study. And again, that you're using text within the child's, we say, zone of proximal development, which just means they're working at the level they're at to move forward to the next level of learning and access those next level skills. The partnership in comprehensive literacy, or PCL framework, has many components, and here they're laid out here. So big picture language workshop, we talk about that, and that was one of the early things we implemented in the program. Not the first, but one of the early. And in language workshop, you're doing reading workshop, you're doing writing, and then you have content workshop. And the intent of that is to have the transfer of skills. Earlier I talked about the reciprocal process of reading and writing, and we want our students to be able to transfer the skills across contexts and across environments. The content workshop allows and supports the teacher facilitating the student using those comprehension skills as they're reading about science, as they're reading about social studies, so that they are understanding what they're reading and they're able to understand those perspectives like you do in character study, but now you're understanding perspectives in a historical study. Or you're applying what you've done in reading workshop and writing workshop to how you're doing your science lab or things like that. So it intentionally facilitates the transfer of skills, so it's not only applied in an isolated area. So where are we now? And then next will be where are we going? So again, the PCL framework was brought forward. We are working to build the capacity of our staff and our instructional practice. If you recall, and again, word study was the first one replaced, we had such different things happening across all buildings and within a building in the area of word study, that replacing that one thing and giving students consistency as they flowed through the grade levels and then switched from elementary to Silverbrook. And then for our students, if they were shifting from school to school, they had consistency in that word study approach. And so we're working on building capacity. That is the first instructional resource that was replaced. In this model, we have our grade level teachers working together. Our special education EL teachers participate in the same training. Our literacy specialists at the K-8 level also serve as instructional coaches. And then we have 2 specific instructional coaches that primarily serve the high school, but also go to other buildings for certain purposes. And so they all work together with the literacy coordinator, who is Heidi Spingola, and their building principals as everything rolls out. We are at the point where we are working to write units of study in literacy. And our original plan would have had people working on that in the summer of 20. And we paused that. That was COVID, the summer of COVID. So we paused. And then last year, again, we couldn't pull our teams that were identified to work on them with subs until late spring. So in late spring, our grade level teachers, our literacy specialists, and instructional coordinators, instructional coaches, all met here with Heidi Spingola, literacy coordinator, to go through the process of how we would be developing the units of study. Then they worked through the summer to begin developing those units of study in for our literacy. So the work designed by the K-8 teams is being finalized, and we know that we want to use the Fontes and Pinnell reading mini lessons as a primary resource for our grades K through 6. We know that we want to use the writing mini lesson book for Fontes and Pinnell in grades K to 1. That is as far as the writing mini lessons book go by Fontes and Pinnell are published. The others are in the works, and so we're not bringing those forward at this time.
Is it possible to mention a couple brief points about why those are the desired resources?
Sure.
Over others, like how they were selected or why they were selected?
Yep. So I will give a brief, and then I'm going to invite Heidi and Jill to add to that.
Okay.
So briefly, the reading mini lessons, and I'm going to go on to the Saravallo book, so I'll come back to that point in just a second.
Okay.
So the Reading Strategies book by Jennifer Saravallo will be used as a primary resource in grades 7 and 8, and the Writing Strategies book by Saravallo in grades 2 through 8. Those not only talk about the strategy, but also provide specific lessons. And a lesson may have a range, like this lesson is identified for grades 2 and 3, or this lesson is identified for grades 7 and 8. So the specific lessons in there do have a more narrow range than just grades 2 through 8. And then to clarify, the Fontes and Pinnell books are specific to a grade level. So there is a kindergarten reading lesson, the reading mini lesson book, and a first grade reading mini lesson book. So if I'm going to back up a little bit and say that our sites had these in their guided reading library as a supplemental resource for a number of years. I don't recall how many, I'm sorry. But our buildings have these in their guided reading libraries. So as the teachers were doing and utilizing the libraries and the resources within their buildings, they might go to them and select a lesson from them to support the students. They, in their buildings, as grade level teams, might have also looked at and talked about it, so they were utilizing some consistent resources. These particular texts offer that guidance of specific lessons, but that flexibility to respond to the students before you. They utilize a mentor text approach and then have the capability to use that with a different text that you already have in your classroom library.
So it's like a companion tool?
I would say it provides a specificity. So we
Okay.
had it kind of as a supplemental companion tool.
Okay,
It really is linked to the practices that we want to see.
okay.
It facilitates that transfer of learning, and it has best practice instruction in it,
Okay,
which is why we're going that way.
okay.
Thank you, Laura. So, those resources in general are part of a bevy of resources for literacy instruction. And if you, I don't know if you've been following the debate between the science of reading. And so there's a number of things going on sort of nationally about the science of reading, but Fontes and Pinnell resources in general have been around for quite a while. And they really span the scope of balanced literacy, benchmark books, and leveled readers and things like that. So it's something that's been in the district for a number of years and fits very well with practices that teachers have had over the years. So it's nothing new. In addition, they have some Fontes and Pinnell library, like guided reading libraries in their classrooms and things like that. So it all kind of fits together. The nice thing about those books is we can get very specific then on the units of study and say, this page number, look at this page number and this lesson goes with this concept or literacy strategy you're trying to get across. So that works really well. It's kind of, we wish they would hurry up and write those other books for the writing pieces because it's going to be 2 years out before they finish that, because that's what our teachers are kind of familiar with.
So that's why it doesn't cover the full range of
Correct.
grades, because they don't, okay. got it.
Yeah. And then for the Saravello books, Jennifer Saravello actually worked for the Teachers College in New York, so she worked for Lucy Calkins.
Okay.
And if you're familiar with the Calkins writing kits and the Calkins reading kits that have been around for probably 10 years, she actually was a protege of Lucy, and then she went out on her own. And so her books have become very popular in kind of that whole science of reading conversation too, in terms of, again, here's a lesson with a page number, here's a mentor text you can use to support that, and here's how you can deliver that in your classroom. Her books are a little bit more broad. It's not specific to a grade level, but there's lessons in there that cover like 2 through 8 or whatever. So there's different page numbers and setup of different lessons in there. So anything Heidi wanted to add?
I think, excuse me, both of those resources, the Fontes and Pinnell resources and the Saravello resources are very teacher-friendly. They are very easy for teachers to navigate and utilize. They provide flexibility for us as a system to make sure that we're in alignment with the standards. So very often you can get a publisher and they have their pre-built scope and sequence, and you don't necessarily have as much flexibility to say, well, but that's not in our standards here, things like that. So they offer us the flexibility to have that teacher clarity, provide us that alignment to the standards, and still make sure that we have really strong instruction that can be spiraled throughout the grades as well, so that students constantly have an opportunity to build on their learning versus it kind of being like a one and done opportunity, I'm going to call it. So the resources here, we talked to staff that are on the unit of study team about multiple resources, and they felt very strongly that these were some of the best ones that were available to use.
So some of these have been in the schools as a supplemental thing, but we'd like to use it as the main.
Primary
Okay.
resources, like foundational, written into
Okay.
the units of study.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then there will be other supplemental things to support what's happening in
Right.
these. Okay.
I know a lot of community members will say, ask if we're using phonics. Just, I mean, you guys are so educated at such a greater level, and sometimes things get oversimplified in, you know, on the ground conversations. Could you mention whether or not that is part of these resources? Is it incorporated as one of the things? I'm sure it's not the only thing, but is it at least in there? If someone were to ask me,
Yeah, and
Would-
you will
you
get
know,
asked.
can I
You
say
will.
yes?
You can say word study.
Okay, well, okay, but isn't word study like when you have them memorized, you're,
No, it's much more than that.
okay.
Do you
okay.
want to explain the word study?
Yes,
program?
please
Yeah.
educate me.
The phonics and word study kit that was adopted at the beginning of last school year, or for the beginning of last school year, that system provides like phonics and phonemic awareness, stemming all the way up to like Greek and Latin roots and stems. So it
Okay.
provides the students with the opportunities for that phonics and phonemic awareness and all those like roots and stems and things that they need in a developmentally appropriate way. The really nice thing about that is then that resource is almost like a companion to this resource because they're by the same publisher. So things that students are seeing in their word study resources, they'd be able to apply in their reading and writing resources. So that is one place that you'll see that. The other place is in our Wisconsin State Standards, there's a category of the literacy standards or a subcategory in literacy standards called Reading Foundational Skills. It's primarily for like our K and 1 grades, but it does actually span through 5th grade. But it's about how do you use like going from left to right in print in a book to learn how to read it? How do you learn how to turn the page and hold the book the right way and all of those pieces? Those things are addressed briefly in our phonics and word study program, but are addressed more heavily in these resources. So between the two, we would be hitting all of that together.
And the science of learning, I mean, for a long time, it was just like, well, there's that magic moment that we can't, you know, put in a bottle, and that's what the science of reading is trying to figure out, right? And then that's what's incorporated into these tools.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, am I,
If
okay,
you
am I
get an
absorbing this
opportunity,
right?
yeah, because if you get an opportunity to see kids working through that word study, like I think the phonics piece that we all think of is like a spelling test, right?
Mhm.
And it's so much more than that. Like, students will get a list of words, they'll break them down, they'll make new lists of words, they put endings and beginnings together and things like that. They just go through a series of different activities to study words versus memorize some words, take a spelling test on Friday.
Yes.
So it's a little bit different process, but it's much more in-depth understanding of words and word meanings.
And I would assume that that helps connect with all different types of learners, because, you know, the memorize, you know, was great for some, but not for all, and we were trying to reach all types of learners, so, okay.
And you could have, like, I think of some of my students who would memorize it for the test. As a
Yes,
string of letters
yeah,
and how to put it on the page, but couldn't apply it in their writing at all.
right.
And this approach helps you to not only apply it at the moment, but in your writing and in your reading. So those reciprocal processes, and I think the name word study is super appropriate for that,
Mhm.
because you really are studying, even as we talk about up to the Latin stems and including those. So we used to have a thing called stems, and we called it out separately.
Okay.
It's within this program now.
Okay.
So, yes, we're still doing Latin stems. It's part of the word study.
Okay, yeah, this is really important for explaining why we're choosing these, you know, what's the motivation behind it, because, I mean, that seems to be the last few months, that seems to be one of the concerns, and so I feel like getting ahead of that at the beginning is important, and
Yeah.
And I like how it's building on each other, so even just if we talk about the word study and the stems, how kids can see a word, not know how to pronounce it necessarily, but they can pick out the Latin in there and figure out what it means. I think that's really cool. I also think this is really great for consistency across the district, and probably will be a weight off some teachers' shoulders too, because they'll know what their neighbor is teaching and, you know, still have the creativity to teach it, but have something to depend on.
I love that you even said, like, how to orient the book, because I remember, this was a long time ago and not in this area, but seeing a very young child holding a book upside down and had like the look on his, it's almost like he was giving a performance. Like, I know that this is what you're supposed to look like when you're reading a book, you know, and I doesn't, you know, doesn't even understand the orientation of letters or words or anything, but just, I mean, you know, it's probably like 2, but just that was so amusing to me, and it stuck with me because we just take for granted that we know how to, you know, pick up a book and, you know, left to right, top to bottom. We forget how we got there, and so I'm glad that these resources break it down, because I think even parents need to remember that this, you know, there is a science behind how we learn, and that's what we're trying to use. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so these will be primary resources now, and they will be, once adopted by the board, we hope to bring these to adoption by the board, but then they'd be in the hands of every teacher will have those, and the specific lessons identified within the units of study. So we're talking about it now, and those reading strategies and writing strategies books and the mini lesson books will go to the public for review, and at the public library, our public will be able to comment on them, look through them, submit through a Google form responses and feedback on those. And so the times are listed up there. That will be publicized on our website, and then again through district newsletters. We will, I would appreciate the comments and feedback you've given, and if there's more, we'd love to hear it. Then it will go forward for board discussion and then come back again in January. So you should expect to see us at the January 4th curriculum committee on the same topic. And so these primary resources will come forward then for board action at the end of January. The specific units of study, as we've talked about, there are mentor texts included in these resources. And so we will then bring those forward as well for review and adoption, because that mentor text will be used with every first grade child. And the teacher will still have some flexibility to do things responding to the students in their classroom, but there are certain mentor texts that will be identified that everyone will use. And so then those will come back. Again, you'll see us in January talking about this, you'll see us in February at the curriculum committee talking about this, but all of that we intend to have wrapped up by the end of February with the full story.
So I just want to offer you a definition of mentor text, if that would help. So when there is a unit of study written, and like we talked about with those Cerebello and Fountas and Pinnell books, it'll say a page number. But in that lesson, if you go into that book, it will say, use this children's book or this, what they call mentor text, to explain this further. And so the way those units are written then is linking in these mentor texts as primary resources, because we want teachers to have those in their hands. And so that's part of bringing that forward to make sure we're following an appropriate process so people know what those mentor texts are.
Okay.
And so those mentor texts really, because we're saying the teacher teaches a lesson from this children's book, is a primary resource. Different than being in a classroom library or in the school library or things like that. So just wanted to offer you guys that definition.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jill. Any other questions, comments, feedback on the literacy information shared today?
I like this, this visual timeline.
Yeah.
This speaks to my how my brain thinks.
Good to note. Anything else from anybody in the group? All right, then we're going to move on to the next topic, and I'm just going to turn off the screens because there is not a presentation for this. The next topic is summer school. And Erin Faust is our program administrator that, as part of her primary responsibilities, is our K-12 summer school program. Another one of her primary responsibilities is our K-12 virtual learning program. And so today, she is with a statewide group of educators who are focused on virtual learning opportunities. She's at the SLATE conference, and many of the sectionals that she's going to are about virtual programs, K-12. And so she is not here today. However, she will be responding if there are questions we need her to address. Jennifer's going to communicate with her, and she'll respond. Otherwise, she'll get back to us. But we've spent a lot of time talking about the summer school program, and I'm very excited about where we're headed. So, Erin was our lead administrator over summer school last year. Yes?
Just to provide some context, I know summer school's always been very, very popular and successful in this district, but COVID, things changed. Can you give me an indication of the difference in participation this past summer compared with maybe the summer of like 19 or?
Yep. So our, during the summer of 2019, we were full-on in-person for summer school. And I'm sorry I didn't pull the numbers for that, but I can do it general.
Yes, general's fine. Like, is it
Yep.
more or
So
less?
2020, we saw a drop because we had, we were virtual for summer school. All summer school was virtual. And so there were many classes we didn't offer. And then again, participation down because kids had just finished the whole last quarter of the school year virtually.
And if I recall, it was more focused on catching kids up that felt like they, didn't do well during the shutdown and that, that was,
We were doing academics, we did
Yeah,
some
yes.
art classes, but we
Mhm.
didn't do the cooking class, and we didn't do the, some of the leadership or escape room courses,
right.
and, or the coding, we didn't do that virtually. And at high school, they, again, the classes that we did offer, we offered virtually. And so we had less participation overall in the summer of 20. So this past summer, 21, we did see an increase in participation over the summer of 2020,
Okay.
but not full-on up to where we had previously been.
And 21 was a combination of in-person and
Yeah.
virtual.
So all of our elementary programs, we offered in person.
Okay.
And we actually gave, kind of gave that option
Mhm.
of virtual or in person, but we didn't have the interest in our K-7, pre-K-7 summer school virtually.
Okay.
We didn't have enough to offer. I think we had 4 students who expressed an interest, and some of them came in person,
Sure.
but we didn't have enough to offer a summer school section.
So K through 7 was in person for 21, and that was still not quite to the same numbers as 2019. Okay.
And then the summer, and then high school courses, some were offered virtually and some were offered in person.
Okay.
Varying by course, we saw some that had increased numbers and some that had decreased numbers.
Okay.
At the end of summer school, Erin communicated with parents and got their feedback on a number of things with regard to summer school, including the offerings. They included, the timing of summer school, those pieces. And she also sought the same information from staff. And so,
Okay.
based on that feedback, she, at the start, I can't remember the first point when the team met, but she invited teachers who are interested in looking at the summer school program and doing some revamping of that to come together to do some co-planning. And with that, they considered the feedback provided by educators, parents, and students. And I'm going to talk about it a little differently, pre-K 7 and then 8 through 12.
Okay.
Okay. So pre-K 7 students that are currently in these grade levels, going forward in summer school, will still have a different schedule than the high schoolers. And so these are non-credit bearing classes. When you're in 8th grade through 12th grade, you take classes that count for high school credit, and the state has some very specific requirements about how much time you need to be in class for those in-person classes.
Okay.
So we'll talk about those two sections a little differently. This past summer, we did offer 8th grade students who wanted more time with their math and reading from 8th grade to come to summer school at Silverbrook, where we had grades 4 through 7. We invited them to come there so that they could continue to hone in on their 8th grade skills before going on to their high school skills. So this was not credit bearing. And typically in 8th grade, when you finished 8th grade, you're going on to your high school career, so you'll take high school credit bearing classes. We will likely look at having that opportunity available for students who need to refine their 8th grade skills before their freshman year in a non-credit. We've gotten a lot of feedback from families about the timing of summer school and the length of time. And we had been offering in pre-K through grade 7, summer school 5 days a week. And we're going to change that to 4 days a week based on the feedback from families and the feedback from staff. And so students in pre-K through 7 would be in class 4 days a week. We'll have the typical offerings of enrichment classes and standards classes in math and reading. And so those offerings will continue. We're going to break it down a little differently so that within the day, a student might take 3 classes and have the opportunity to take some of those enrichment classes. There are a couple of different schedules the team is still looking at, whether that pre-K 7 would have the opportunity to take up to 4 classes potentially during the summer school half day. But again, 4 days a week. Still offered over a 4-week span. Then in August, the first 2 weeks of August, those same pre-K 7 students would have the opportunity to take a math or a reading standards class that is a big jump, a big boost right before school starts. So it gives them 4 days a week at the start of summer, and then a break, a gap. And then just before school starts in August, they would have another opportunity to take 2 more weeks. During those same 2 weeks, we'll for sure bring in Jumpstart to kindergarten, and we've done in the past at times a jump into Silverbrook. And so those jump into classes will be offered for those specific grade levels. along with our camps, like our orchestra camp and our band camps and our choir camps. Those would also be offered during that same span of time.
Because it's only 2 weeks in August, are the classes longer or than the first session?
So some of that is duration of, so longer than the summer, I think they're 90 minutes in those first 2 weeks. Which
Okay.
would be longer if we do a 4-week, if we do 4 classes in a day. In the early part of summer school, it would be a little longer, but they're not gonna go longer than 90 minutes.
Okay.
When we present summer school, when we present to the board to move forward with the summer school program, we'll have the whole schedule in there.
Okay.
And they're kind of like orientation, and from getting familiar with the grounds and just where everything
Oh, the
is.
jump start?
Yeah, the jump
The jump
starts,
starts
yeah,
are
yeah,
that. It's
yeah.
get to know your way around, get to know what a date, your schedule's gonna look like. It gives teachers, like think of jumping into kindergarten, gives teachers that time. It helps with, it helps parents go, here's my kindergarten.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know,
Yes.
some kids need a little more processing time to orient themselves, and yeah, I love that we offer that for those kids.
And, you know all the paperwork you have to do and just in completing and making sure that your child's in the, it helps parents and it helps students
Yeah, yeah.
for those jump starts.
But that's why they're shorter, because it's not like, following these-
Jumpstart itself will only be a couple of days.
Yeah.
And so it's, Jumpstart has been 1 to up to 3 days of
Okay.
time, but shorter.
Sure.
But the math and reading standards that allow you to refine those specific skills before you launch into the grade level
Mhm.
will be the 90-minute for that full 2 weeks.
Okay.
Those math and ELA standards classes that are offered in session 2, those are also offered in session 1, so like they could choose.
They could choose,
Okay.
and I would, they could choose, yes.
Okay. So if I have, a vacation in June, I could do the math class in August. Okay.
So another point that the summer school team has done is they've modified the summer school form. And that is in your packet. It's linked for those who are not here. It's linked in board docs. And so this right now is what their draft of the summer school sign-up form. Or this is not the sign-up form itself, I'm sorry. This is the communication to families. And so for the pre-K-7 program, this form would be used to send to parents to say, your child has expressed interest in this class, or this class, or this class, and encourage them to sign their child up for summer school.
So this is something that's being done at the end of the school
So like,
year.
no, more in spring.
Okay.
So summer
I mean,
school
that's
sign-up
what I
will start
meant,
in
I
March.
guess.
Oh, yeah, okay. Summer school sign-up will start in March again.
Okay.
And that's our typical target. And so teachers send letters home with some students to say, hey, I really appreciate
Okay.
it. This gives that opportunity for them to send the form more directed, more individualized with all children, right? And then they're going to create little videos that say, this is what this class is about. So that, yeah, do too. I
Little
think-
sales pitch.
Yes.
Mhm. Well, there's just so many great enrichment classes that we offer,
Yeah.
and you don't necessarily know what it's about, so I think that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and we have classes that have been identified, but haven't run yet. And so they need some more development of the specific day-to-day lessons, but the framework of the class is there. And so to have some of those identified as well and share those out. Teachers will have the opportunity to say, you know what, I'm really interested in further developing this coding class, or I'm really interested in further developing this Mo Williams author study class, or whatever it is, they're going to have that opportunity to propose some of those enrichment and, or say, you know what, I would love to teach in this genre study, and say, I will take that one on. So that is more about the PK7 opportunities. At the high school level, and that includes eighth graders, current eighth graders, who will be moving on to high school, that want to start earning some of their high school credits. Fayette had been a very popular class to take in summer school. We saw lower numbers in Fayette last summer.
Okay.
And we want to continue with our in-person offerings, but also perhaps a student who, you know, now has finished their sophomore year of high school and is like, you know what, I love this math and I want to make sure I can get and complete calculus and calculus A and BC. So maybe they want to take the pre-calc in summer school, and that's, so to give them the opportunity to do that virtually, Erin is working with our virtual partner WVS on making sure we can expand some of those opportunities, even if we might have only like 3 kids that are in that situation that went, you know, I'm not yet, I'm not yet on track for that, but I want to make sure I get this pre-calc in now, and give them that chance. And so we want to make sure we have some of those things accessible to our students. We offer classes that students can retake if they fail the class. We can, so that's credit recovery. We also want to be able to offer for advancement. And so some of those will be in-house and some of those will be with the virtual partnership. That summer school, again, for in-person is, they can have only up to 2 days that they're missing because of the length of time and the number of minutes. So based on 1 day in summer school, essentially equaling approximately a full week, the number of minutes of instruction that they need, according to our Department of Public Instruction, that high school, summer school, credit-bearing courses will be 5 days a week in that first section. Band camp and some strength and conditioning, some other things that we do like in August aren't credit-bearing, but are enrichment opportunities for our high school. Some of the staff components, one of the things with our summer school teams that we want to make sure we do is a little difference in our onboarding. So you might be teaching summer school in a building you're not as familiar with. We just want to spend a little more time onboarding and our summer school staff. Some of our summer school staff are from outside the district, so again, just being very specific in that onboarding and having that available both in person and through a Canvas course we can go back and review some days. We have, I think that our special education team has been very good about making sure that staff who are working with students with IEPs have the IEP at a glance and know what services are needed and what supports are needed, but to also have some more time for questions and answers after you've looked through that and after you've had time to not only look through it, read it, but think about it, and then get that layout of the building so that you can ask specific questions in relation to these services in this environment. Any questions about summer school? Okay. So the next thing on the agenda is our process for reviewing the 300 series policies. So we had, in the last few years, we've been through most of the 300 series policies, but not all of them. You have in board docs a document that lists out all of the policies that are in the 300 series, and they're linked up there. And soon, the policy committee will be working through the 300 series and reviewing each of these. And Jen Wimmer would like your feedback. So go through the policies, take a look at them. Some of them haven't been updated in some time, but all of them will be reviewed, whether it's like, oh yeah, we reviewed it and we're leaving it, you know, and some will need to be revised and some will need to be totally redone. So she would like your input as a curriculum committee on what you, pardon me, what you see in the policies as redundant, as outdated, what you see as missing in there, what you see as a need, and where you have clarification or feedback. Tani, did you want to say something?
Oh. I'm just looking at the days and hours of instruction, and I know every now and then I get people that, why does high school start so early? Why does the elementary school start so late? Why can't those be switched, you know?
Yeah, and there's a lot of people who ask those questions.
Yeah.
That may be something.
And I know busing is an issue and after-school athletics is part of it, you know, but this might be an opportunity to at least have a discussion around it, so there's more clarity, even if we don't change it. But it also, yeah, might be a big, bold move. But one I'm not sure that I want to deal with.
So, and Andy Sarno happens to be in the room here and then. Well, I think he's still in the room. I got the poll in my way, maybe not.
Yeah. Is he the
but-
person I gotta start
Well,
with?
he's transportation.
Right,
So,
yeah.
but ours, so it's one of those that combines
Yeah.
multiple areas, and our bus company is here to serve us.
Yeah.
And, so we would work, he would say, if the bus company's here to serve us, we will work out and as a learning environment, looking at that from the learning aspect. And that's a good point to bring
Yeah,
up.
well, I mean,
We've heard feedback, so.
teenagers need a lot of sleep, and young kids get up earlier naturally. I mean, it just, you know, if we're only going on those factors, which I know we aren't, it's never that simple, but, yeah. It's just, you read my mind. Something was going on up there, and that's what it was.
So take your time to look at those, and again, if there's comments, questions, feedbacks, and then what the policy committee also does is they'll look at all the WASB policies that are in the 300. So what does WASB have in its sample or recommended policies that we don't currently have a policy on? And do we need that? So are we missing anything, or do we have things that we don't need? And again, what needs to be updated?
And I see it says in the coming months, so it's not like they're looking at all of these next week or
Oh,
something.
No, but
I like the heads up.
Yeah, I do
like the heads up.
It's gonna take a little bit.
Mhm.
it will. And
Yeah. We're already
It's not
used to
like
that
reading.
now.
I know.
you don't have to hold all your feedback for a certain time. So if you like go, oh, I'm gonna do the 310 series or the 310 and 320 series and then give feedback on that, please
I
feel
like
free
that.
to do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We'll have to put a schedule together for ourselves.
Sounds good to have two people looking at them at the same time, right? So you can
Yeah.
like, give each other feedback and bounce things off of each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And check in with each other.
Yes.
Yep, I agree.
Any other questions, comments about the policy series and any questions on getting feedback or providing feedback?
Not yet.
Who, do you want us to go to you, if we have questions, or
You
what
can
do you
certainly
prefer?
ask questions for me, but Jen Wimmer is facilitating all the policy committee
Okay,
and the revisions, and so she'll want the feedback directly as well.
got it.
And so don't feel that you can't go right to her or anything.
Sure. Okay.
So the last item on our agenda are the educational options for the 22-23 school year. And every December, we are required by statute to send a notification to our parents of the educational options that will be available in the next school year.
Okay.
So for 22-23, what will be available? And there are certain things that we have to include in this. In January, we have to post a Class 1 notice. So these items always look extremely similar. And the Class 1 notice, being a Class 1 notice, gets posted in the paper. And that we're required to have on the, access to that from the front page of the website. So one of the things that is included is the current school accountability rating. And so that's been revised because previously the last school year that we had available was the 18-19 school year because there was not a report card for the 19-20.
Yeah, we just talked about that the last meeting.
Yes, exactly. So this document includes all of the information that is required in that annual parental notice. We have our early learning team has gone through to revise all of and make sure that the early learning information is accurate. The report card information has been updated. New to the annual parental notice this year is the identification of youth apprenticeship for grades 11 and 12. And so that is indicated in the top. Down below in the section where we spell out early college credit, start college now, you can see the placeholder for youth apprenticeship. We'll put a similar blurb in there before that goes out to families.
Okay.
What we typically do is we send it out in the family newsletter, and we also share it with the principals. And then again, it'll be on the website. And that happens annually in December.
So is that the youth apprenticeship and then obviously the update of the accountability rating? Are those the two call-outs that are new?
Those are the two call-outs. We always make sure that information is accurate. Again, we revised the early learning to be up to date. And some consistency in language in how we say, you know, this is the Kettle Moraine YMCA located at this building.
Okay.
So we have some slight revisions there, but the part-time open enrollment, early college credit, start college now. The other piece that we always update is the private school choice program. So we're required in here to identify the schools that are engaged in the private school choice through the Department of Public Instruction. And DPI updates that during the year. So we'll send this out in December. Oftentimes January, February, they're updating that list. And so we actually put the link right in there so that if you went back to this document and it had been updated, you can go in and see what are the private schools in the West Bend School District that are engaged in the boundaries of the West Bend School District that are engaged in the private school choice program. But we also list those out separate. Other than that, there's no major revisions to the document.
Okay.
item on our agenda.
Okay. Anybody else have anything for me? Nope. Okay, well, we are going to adjourn at 9:09. Thank you.